triple DPS or whatever it was, the Sombra goats that Blank were running, I don't know that Melbourne Mavericks are going to be quite as keen to play that, which I think actually does play into the hands of Ground Zero a little bit more here.
Well,
remember last season, Heist very good in the Goats v Goats matchups. I don't see how Ground Zero goes today, and what looks like is going to be a Goats v Goats matchup.
Exactly right. If Ground Zero can keep this on Goats, one would think that maybe things are going to potentially go their way. Last week, as you said, Jordan, was a little bit difficult for them. They certainly they were exposed. Some of the flaws in their team comp were really brought to the forefront, I suppose. But if the rest of the teams are willing to play Goats against them, perhaps it may work out in their favour. For now, Melbourne going to drop down onto the point. Duboy going to be the first one down. Getting picked up there by Gusto. Mini shield quite low, as is Mini as well. It forced back also. Bust not looking that great either, but Mini picked up. Ground Zero now 2 up. Jungle Jazz going to get D-Mech, but surely from this point, Ground Zero should pick up the win. Well, I say that. Nami does pick up Bust, and the Transcendence will come through. This one from Dowsu. And Ground Zero actually being forced back off the point here, Jordan. Melbourne going to find the fight win. Yeah,
they certainly are. And Melbourne Mavericks, they're continuing with that good, strong team coordination that we saw last week. You know, one of the things we highlighted about Melbourne Mavericks is that they all seem to be in tune a little bit more so than Atletico, who were their opponents for that week. And it certainly seems to be the case here once again. Their position early in the high ground was nice. Pushing back in now, though, is Ground Zero.
Just watching Bust right now. Going to take a little bit of damage. Trans will come out from Melbourne. Sure, that's Forbles. Throw with the sound barrier. Nami growing out of grab into the middle. They're looking to follow up with a fair bit of damage. Shadow coming through as well. Mini swing. They have a strong straight into Bust. Dowsu finds another Transcendence. It's only been about 60 seconds since the last one, but they will not be able to find the fight win here. Melbourne continue to push them back. Winter and Gusto still sitting on ultimates. Melbourne Mavericks looking pretty good.
Seeing the same sort of problems start to crop up again here for Ground Zero, and to be fair, they are running 2 players off role. Jungle Jazz, normally their main support, playing that off-tank position. Choco coming in for the main support role, but you're not seeing the value come out of the ultimate that you'd expect to see from Ground Zero typically, and that's being a big problem for them. Melbourne Mavericks, on the other hand, though, is again another example of that with Gusto getting the 2K out of the self-destruct, are finding so much value out of all of their ultimates every single time Ground Zero seems to try and do something. Melbourne Mavericks have the appropriate counter, and, you know, sometimes Melbourne Mavericks just making magic happen from the get-go, for example, like that one with Gusto.
Well, that's it, right? If all you have to do is throw out one Diva ultimate, one self-destruct, you win the fight by yourself. A free 30, 45 seconds or something like that. That's a very valuable ultimate. Ground Zero going to push them to the point. Again, self-destruct coming out this time from Jungle Jazz. Transcendence coming through as, of course, Mini with that Reinhardt shield. No one going to go down. Baubles popping out the trans, but now Melbourne are out of ultimates. Bust does have that Earth Shatter, throws it through, doesn't necessarily get the value required. This particular situation, Dowsu with third trans coming through, and as you can see, Jungle Jazz will stop Nami's Graviton Surge. Finally, Ground Zero being able to get the better of the Melbourne Mavericks' third or fourth fight in here, Jordan. At 99%, however, this is a difficult position to defend.
I mean, that's pretty damn clutch, actually, out of Jungle Jazz. The defense matrix, they really needed something, some individual play to turn the tide of that fight, because Bust, especially after throwing out the Earth Shatter and not really being able to get anything out of it, you sort of thought the fight was already over for Ground Zero. But now they still have a chance. Forward hold from them, trying to get some ult charge up early here. Keep Melbourne Mavericks at bay for as long as possible. It's definitely a difficult task here, though, for Ground Zero.
It's going to be difficult for sure. Look at this. Melbourne have a ton of ultimates at their disposal as well, but Bust does manage to catch out Mini. Forbles, Winter, Nami all down. Ground Zero managed to sneak themselves in another fight win here, Jordan.
That was actually a fatty shatty out from Bust.
Fatty shatty.
Fatty shatty, as well as the charge. The charge, you got to give it to him, a masterstroke really from Bust. And the shatter to follow up, great stuff. Completely shuts it down, gives Ground Zero a chance here. They've built up the ultimates. They've got the sound barrier. They're going to have the grab combo with the self-destruct here. Now it suddenly starts to look more winnable for Ground Zero.
Certainly does, and they needed to win that fight because Melbourne were looking very strong. They had a ton of ultimates in their pocket, and they were ready to go this time that now Ground Zero have bought for themselves. You can see they managed to pick up 4 ultimates. In the meantime, self-destruct coming through. Everyone needs to stay alive here for Ground Zero. So it's actually Choco going down, so that's definitely less than ideal. The beat, I'm not even sure what happened there, to be perfectly honest. Look, it's okay. The trans going to come through anyway. Ground Zero looking to perhaps lose this fight. Caught up in the grab coming out from Nami, and they're going to find Locus as well. So Melbourne should be able to find the fight, and they should be able to find themselves the point. I think Choco tried to use the ultimate, but he went down during the process.
Yeah, I actually think he did get it off, but it went down regardless. Ground Zero, unfortunate. It was a nice little attempt at a comeback, but it always felt like there was maybe a little bit too much ahead of them there, that they had to win 4 or 5 fights in a row pretty cleanly. And as soon as you see one player go down to that self-destruct, as has been the case a lot of the times when Gusto's been throwing that Diva Bomb out, that you sort of think the fight's probably going to fall by the wayside with that player disadvantage. But a little bit of a better showing from Ground Zero in toward the end there. At the start, I was a little bit wishy-washy, a little bit poor. Dalsu did nice work getting so many Transcendences up, but they didn't really seem to have too much of an effect regardless. So I think if Ground Zero can start off from square one, looking a little bit more powerful, starting off with a bit more consistency at the start of this round, don't put yourself in a 0 to 99 kind of a deficit. It's obviously going to be a much better scenario.
It's very difficult to come back from that, isn't it? Literally all your opponents need to do is save up 5 or 6 ultimates and force their way through. And to be perfectly honest, if it wasn't for what Elfishguy called that fatty shatty, I think that would have been the end of the round right there. If they had so many ultimates to work with, losing a key player at a crucial time like that. I sense bought another 30 seconds, but it really was only another 30 seconds. Yeah,
look, it gave them opportunities, and there's always going to be those kinds of situations. But when we look at Heist, you are going to be looking for a player like Bust to be stepping up and being able to hit big Earth Shatters like that. I mean, that was a key proponent of their success last season, Ben. I think a lot of people were really impressed with how Bust was performing on that main tank role. Coming into the season, we didn't expect much out of Heist, but it all seemed to kind of come into fruition all together at the same time. And I don't know, it doesn't seem to be clicking quite as much right now for Ground Zero as it was last season.
Yeah, well, I guess it's tough, right? When you talk about a team, say, hey, this particular team is great at this particular team comp, which is a team comp which is very team-centric, very team-focused, and then you change a player and then move a player, it makes life a little bit more tough, right? That one thing that they did have over everyone else, they now don't necessarily have to work with. So it is definitely a difficult situation to be in for Ground Zero, but they've got a look. They found a little bit there. They found a little bit there on the first point. So we'll see what they can do now. Still, of course, on Oasis, our control point map in our first match here. Overwatch Contenders Australia week number 2 of 2019. Ground Zero looking to even this one up. One apiece if they can here and keep the first map alive.
Army just trying to charge up the Graviton Surge. See a Ground Zero again being forced back. Obviously, that energy plays a big part of it, but really across the board, we're seeing a lot of ult charge going over to Melbourne Mavericks. Ground Zero, they just can't seem to keep those heals up. You see how low Jungle Jazz is for so long. Whereas Melbourne Mavericks, you look at their health bars, and they're almost always above 3/4.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty crucial point. It's literally only Dalsu who was looking like they sort of had that ultimate advantage over their counterparts on the Melbourne Mavericks. For now, though, Melbourne will be a little bit ahead. We'll see how these ultimates are used. The Graviton Surge will come through. Trance is popped by Baubles, who are able to keep the team going strong. Counter grab now coming out from Melbourne. They want to follow through now with a little bit of damage. Shields for both teams also. The question is who's going to go down first. Mini, very low. Mini actually picked up. See Bust throwing out an Oceania as well, trying to guarantee themselves this fight win, unlike what we saw the first time around on the previous point. Yeah, definitely pretty important for Ground Zero to actually get the fight win here sooner rather than later. The longer this goes on, the more percentage ticks up for Melbourne Mavericks, and that's really what they're looking for at the moment. The fight is still sort of hanging in the balance, to be honest, depending on how these respawns come in. And in fact, it actually does look like Melbourne Mavericks are going to win that one. So Ground Zero, they would have been better off resetting straight away and trying to make sure that they have those 6v6 fights, but they continue the fight going, trying to make it work. Yeah, I could get it, Jordan, if the point was still contested, if there weren't percentage points going against them, if they had not allowed Melbourne to essentially grab the point for free the first time around. And now, all of a sudden, they're 75% up, Jordan. I feel like this round's barely started. Yeah, Nami just holding the off angle there, making sure that it'll be an easy Graviton Surge for himself, and that also was going to result in a pretty easy team fight wipe. Yeah, not much the Melbourne Mavericks could do about that. It really needed to be some sort of crazy eat from Jungle Jazz, and unfortunately as well, Jungle Jazz is going to be staggered. So, Ben, this is looking like it's a 2-0 straight on the board for Melbourne Mavericks to start the day off here. Bust has already gone over to the Wrecking Ball, has to try and get the touch. Boop back a little bit there. He's not even going to be able to get on the point. Wow. It's great work from Melbourne Mavericks. It was a boot followed up by the flail. That was a bit of an interesting one for me, to be perfectly honest, Jordan. I was waiting maybe for round 2 to be a little bit different from round 1. And I guess, to be fair, it was quite different from the first round. It was really, that time around, it never looked like ground 0 were in it.
Yeah. I'd have to agree. And I guess, again, you have to go back to the fact that they are running a sub, which is also filling a slot that then forces one of their main players into an off role. So you're almost playing with only like 4 of your core roster in that case.
4.5, yeah.
Yeah, because Jungle Jazz, you know, he's not obviously not known for that Diva play. I wonder, would it be better to put Choco into the Diva position there and have Jungle Jazz on the Lucio? But I guess that's a discussion that the team has had, and they've decided, you know, to put Choco on probably what is more of his comfort choice. I guess we don't necessarily
want to second guess that.
Yeah.
But look at that. That was a great play actually coming out from Bust, and one of the best plays. Look, if anyone can carry ground 0 to victory, it would be Bust, right? You know, it's
I mean, you would think so.
Well, I've got like, what, 20 seats? 30 seats?
Yeah. Well, okay, if we're going to go with that analogy, sure. But from what we've seen so far this season, Ben, from ground 0, I don't know. Like, it just seems like the coordination isn't quite there. Even last week when they had that full core roster, it sort of just, I don't know. The fights are not playing out the way that you expect them to. If you watch from an individual's perspective, they're not being really able to get in positions that they want to. They're not being able to put the damage out that they want to. When they throw an ultimate, when they throw the self-destruct or the grav, no kills come from it at all. I mean, Dalsu's throwing out his transcendences, but people are still dying. That kind of thing. So really, everything just isn't gelling quite right now for ground 0. And the question is going to be, how long is it going to take them to get back to that season 2 form, or season 3 form, I should say, and if they're even going to get back to that form, because there's a lot of strong teams in this competition, Ben, and they were a top 4 team last season. But if they can't hit that same peak, they're going to be left by the wayside quite quickly.
Yeah, and so very quickly, Oasis is already over here. The Melbourne Mavericks now 1-0 up in this, I guess, is, you know, 4 maps, first to 3, that sort of deal. But look, for me, the concern or the question is, if they went through literally an entire season playing GOATs, and that's their strong point, and now GOATs isn't working because of this. Like, what do you do today? But it's not even that, what do you do today, Jordan? What's the solution for today?
It's not, though, but they're playing GOATs, and they're playing against GOATs. So last week we were making the excuse for them saying, hey, look, they're playing against quad DPS.
But if it's not working, I don't know.
Maybe they're not. Maybe
what is Melbourne doing? Are they doing something different? Are they just playing well? Is it just that
they're positioning better? They're making better usage of their ultimates.
They've been working on their GOATs comp, and they're just finding those little nuances. I don't know. It's very difficult to gauge when it's not the same roster we saw last week from ground 0. That's what makes this I suppose, question difficult.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Map number 2, moving across to Kings Row, the first time we've seen it this season. I actually haven't seen it for a little while, I think, in Contenders. So, nice to see it back in and doing its thing. I have missed you, Kings Row, to be perfectly honest. Winter going to be coming out here on the Farah. This is potentially something a little bit difficult for ground 0 to deal with, of course.
Yep.
Particularly being on the defensive side. You don't really have much opportunity to swap across either here, Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. You basically need to win this fight, and you need to continue to win fights with the same composition, because like you said, you can't swap. We've already seen that triple DPS be a big problem for ground 0 last week. Jungle Jazz, at least, will be able to get rid of Guzto. Nami, though, there's absolutely no one that can contest him at the moment. The longer this fight progresses, the more opportunities that Widowmaker is going to have to find some picks. Ground 0 continuing to give up ticks.
Yeah, well, getting ever closer, halfway through, looking to make it 66%. About to hit that one. Winter sitting on the Rocket Barrage, throws that one straight away. Does manage to pick up Locust, but Dowsu, I was going to say earlier, it feels like if anyone can deal with this Farah, perhaps it's Dowsu there. That's about what you're hoping for. But picking up the Farah is not enough this time around. Melbourne will be able to pick up the point and do so with a ton of time still left on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it out from Melbourne Mavericks. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to go for a triple DPS, particularly on that point where there's so many options to spread out, force the ground 0 guys into an inopportune position. When you think about them getting stuck in the hotel there was really nowhere that ground 0 could go. Whichever door they took, they were going to take damage from the Rockets or from the Widowmaker. And Sombra there for Guzto as well, used to play DPS way back in the day.
Yeah.
Even to have him being able to swap onto a second or third DPS is not a bad option at all.
EMP available from Gusto, looking to pop that one. No, not going to happen. Duboy coming through, picking up the Sombra. Big pick straight away there from Ground Zero. I guess the other point, Jordan, is that Ground Zero has the benefit of being able to stick onto this Goats, whilst Melbourne have had to sort of swap off their team comp that they used for point A.
Yeah, but with that said, a fight win here off the back of an EMP is going to put Melbourne Mavericks straight back in a strong situation, economically speaking. So as long as Guzto gets a good one off here, I think that's going to be fine.
Oh!
Nice Transcenders, excellent from Dalsu.
Perfect timing. Dalsu again with the big plays, keeping Ground Zero alive. Choco also going to use the sound barrier, keep the team holding strong here on the payload. Self-destruct coming through from Jungle Jazz, looking to catch someone out, not this time around. Unfortunately for Ground Zero, Melbourne are still all alive. Dubois going to go down. Bus kind of low as well, needs some healing. Staying alive for now. No, it's Fluoro who captures the Winston out, and Choco found out also. So even though it looked like maybe they'd done well, they do not win the fight.
Yeah, look, I really feel sorry for Ground Zero there, because you look at the individuals and you say they did such an excellent job. They did all the right things.
Yeah.
Choco doesn't get hit by the EMP, so he can get the sound barrier down, but then they layer those support ultimates. Dalsu perfectly timed with the Transcendence, but again, two at the same time, and look at the swing that has really made happen here for Melbourne Mavericks. Even though Ground Zero had all the ultimates and they played out the fight pretty nicely, they couldn't get enough done. And Melbourne Mavericks, off the back of one EMP, now have the ultimate advantage, and they've also pushed all the way through Phase B, so
just think if that first EMP had gone off, if Dubois hadn't been able to stop them the first time around, it could have been even worse, Elfishguy. The point, the payload successfully pushed forward towards the second objective here. Transcendence will come out from Ground Zero, that is Dalsu, but they've already lost Locust. Bus will find Mini. Maybe this could be enough to get a bit of a foothold here on the payload, perhaps for Ground Zero. They'll do what they can, and they will manage to push Melbourne back, at least for now. 4 minutes still on the clock.
For now, but for how much longer?
Yeah.
Obviously that payload has already been capped through, so we're into Phase C of the map, which does give Melbourne Mavericks that respawn advantage, at least at this part of the map. Ground Zero are going to try and take the fight, and that's a nice shatter.
Nice shatter coming out from Bus. Sound barrier going to come through, this time from Melbourne. Everyone's still alive. No one, I don't think, actually went down as a result of that Earth Shatter. So this could cost Ground Zero again. Bus eventually will go down. Mini looking strong. The shield not necessarily healthy, but it does not matter. The Reinhardt here for Melbourne, pushing aggressively forward in towards Objective C. Getting ever closer is the payload. Not very far to go now. Still 3:20 on the clock. It has not taken them long at all.
No, certainly not. Ground Zero don't have a lot to defend with, at least for the next 10 seconds or so, until these ultimates come up. Mini will just back away.
Look, waiting for this Earth Shatter Elfishguy, potentially down the left, under the payload, something like that. Looking to see where it goes. Throws it through. I'm not sure who we collected there. Wasn't necessarily what they wanted, I suspect. Sound barrier will come out from Ground Zero. Dalsu has a trans also, but Jungle Jazz and Dubois will manage to pick up two crucial picks. Melbourne forced to fall back.
That's really important as well for Ground Zero, because Melbourne Mavericks still had the Graviton Surge in their back pocket. If that fight would have even been in sort of a neutral situation, a balancing act, then Ground Zero definitely would have fallen by the wayside. That said, they do have the Transcendence for Dalsu, so maybe that counters it out, but the fact that they're able to get a couple of those picks really does negate all of that. Ground Zero do survive another fight. Plenty more, though, where that came from for Melbourne Mavericks, and another attempt on
Mini
forward.
booped out, going to go down to Locust. Trans coming up from Forbles. Dubois been picked up also, so it's a 1-for-1. Ground Zero not in an awful position, but now Winter picks up Choco also. Ground Zero going to be forced to fall back. Going to actually potentially get caught out here in the middle, Jordan. Potential to get sort of sandwiched in, not a great spot.
Gusto looking for an angle with the self-destruct, perhaps waiting for the Graviton Surge from Nami, but it's actually going to be a preemptive grab out from Locust. Here comes Nami's, and see what the follow-up is going to be from Melbourne Mavericks. Neither getting too much until Gusto's self-destruct comes across, gets the demon, gets Dubois. There's an Earth Shatter involved in the mix there as well, but it's not going to matter for Ground Zero. Buster's Earth Shatter doesn't do anything, and Melbourne Mavericks, it looks like they're going to finish the map off with some amazing amounts of time left. 1:36. That is a very scary prospect ahead here for Ground Zero.
It's not as bad as it could have been, at least. I think there are, 3 or 4 minutes on the clock coming in towards the final phase. It could have been even worse than that, I suppose, but 94 seconds sitting there on the clock for Melbourne, should they need a second attempt here, is definitely a very good time to have to start things off once again. Considering what we saw before and knowing what this type of map is like, Jordan, it's enough time to capture the first point and then get onto the payload.
Yeah, definitely. And then once you get on the payload, it sort of can go anywhere from there. You know, you get that hype train rolling. Well, even at this point for Ground Zero, getting all the way through the map is definitely still a question mark. I mean, what we saw last week and what we've seen so far today hasn't filled me with confidence. I mean, I hate to say it, right? But, like, it definitely looks like a far cry from what we were seeing last season out from the highest roster.
It's a shame for me because I really did want to see the full strength Ground Zero roster up against the full strength Melbourne Mavericks.
Now the question is here, like, do you as Ground Zero continue with that GOATS composition, or do they swap off? You know, try and put Locust and Dewboy onto characters where they can make those individual impact plays, you know, like the Widowmaker that we're seeing hovered. I don't think it'll be Dewboy to play it. More likely it would be Locust.
Or
he probably will at the start if he gets something great. If not, he's probably just going to swap off onto the Brigitte, but he's been spotted by the Diva up there, so realistically I'm not seeing much of an opportunity here for Dewboy, which it is going to put them back onto the GOATS composition. Is this the right choice? I suppose for Ground Zero it is, but is it going to work? That's really the next kind of caveat, the follow-up to it.
Well, that's it, right? It's the best of all of the choices, I still feel, for Ground Zero, but whether they can get the required result using this particular team comp is perhaps a different story, but it's all in their hands right now, pushing through out towards the first objective. Still everyone alive, but Jungle Jazz and Dowsu both very low. That's not necessarily the start they needed.
Yeah, I mean, you're really just seeing how split Ground Zero is right now. The individuals aren't all clumped up together as you need to be on that GOATS composition. Dowsu has made the swap over onto Moira, already deciding that he's not going to be able to survive too long with the Zenyatta, which is fair enough when there's a Winston Diva and a Sombra all chasing after you, but it does mean that there's not going to be any Discord Orbs, and he's even still being chased down. I mean, where is the rest of Ground Zero right now? That's the question. What are they doing?
Yeah, unfortunately for Ground Zero, Dowsu just kind of being played with there after having swapped to the Moira. Gusto up here on Diva, firing onto the majority of Ground Zero from the high ground. They're looking to see if they can find a capture, but it's actually Mini going to come through with the Primal Rage, picks up Bus and Choco. Dewboy also going to go down. Gusto flies on through in the mech, looking to clean up Jungle Jazz as well, but that one's going to go down to Mini and a quick left fist. So, the Melbourne Mavericks looking strong here on defense. Ground Zero were able to capture 1/3 of Objective A. Still 66% remains.
It's a lot of percent remaining right now from Ground Zero's perspective. Haven't been able to take a good solid 6v6 fight just yet either. They've been getting picked off. I mean, in particular, it's been Dowsu that's been getting picked off through some fault of his own, but also some fault of the team just not coordinating each other, not sticking together.
Winter can be forced back out of taking a bit of a strike to the face, but all healed up right now. EMP is also available, and this will actually catch out the majority of Ground Zero. The self-destruct from Gusto also exploding in Dewboy's face. Graviton Surge this time coming up from Ground Zero, looking potentially to follow it up with a little bit of damage. Not bad. Jungle Jazz down. Jungle Jazz does not matter. Manages to find two. Is this going to be enough to get Ground Zero onto the board?
It certainly should be at this point. If they're not able to cap off the back of that, then I'm definitely going to be a little bit worried. The ultimate does actually come out onto Winston, the nano boost, which is going to force Ground Zero back a little bit, and this will give Melbourne Mavericks some time to heal those players up, and the respawns to come back as well. Sound barrier down from Fluoro, and Melbourne Mavericks, they're returning with a vengeance.
Mini coming through with the Primal Rage. Locust going to go down. Ground Zero now lost their Zarya. This makes life very tough. Choco quite low also. You can see Ground Zero doing what they can on the point now. Up to 2/3, looking for the full 100%, 60 seconds on the clock. But Melbourne are going to make this difficult for them. Dewboy down to the Ana, and now it looks like Melbourne's starting to find their footing once again. The Diva has been demeched. Bus looking low. He's going to go down once again to a punch from Mini. Winter finds Jungle Jazz. Gusto sitting on the high ground with the self-destruct available, and right now it is not looking good for Ground Zero at all.
No, definitely not. It's very disappointing for Ground Zero how this has played out, and you can see the pressure that Winter's been able to put on them as well, with that Sombra in the back line, keeping the healers busy. Ground Zero, the tanks are not getting the heals that they really need and what they want, and similarly the supports are not getting the protection that they need and they want. And so for Ground Zero, it's all falling apart.
Yet again, the EMP comes in over the top. Not even sure who we caught out. Was it only Dowsu plus one other? The self-destruct from Jungle Jazz. One last hope. Finds Nami and Mini tanks it down, boys and girls. Finally, Ground Zero managed to come together and pick up the kills that they need. 2 seconds on the clock. They will capture the first objective into overtime. And now 2.5 minutes to get the payload moving.
Yeah, well, it's a chance for Ground Zero. It's a very slim one, though. They are going to have an absolutely stellar push through Phase B and Phase C to even finish the map with time remaining. And at this point, I mean, for Ground Zero, the way that they win that fight is by getting 2 with the self-destruct. And I don't think you can really rely on that time and time again. You can't rely on that as every fight. So Ground Zero, we're just not seeing them win the standard fights. Melbourne Mavericks have looked so much more coordinated and so much better in the straight-up fights. And it's only when they get big individual ultimates that Ground Zero actually makes something happen.
Bust very low. Look at this. 3 players going down almost simultaneously. Gusto follows it up with a 4th. Mini still holding onto that Earth Shatter also here. See 140 now on the clock for Ground Zero to get back onto the payload and make things happen here. They are very quickly running out of time. Melbourne looking very good.
I just don't know where to turn right now for Ground Zero. Like, what do they do? What option do they have that can help them beat Melbourne Mavericks today? Because it's really looking like a difficult task for Ground Zero. Every meter that they push on forward is a grind.
Mini getting into the thick of things there. You can see the Zarya bubble on top of them as well. The question is, when does the Earth Shatter come through? Throws it out now, captures Duboy. That's going to go down to Forbles. Forbles pops the trance as well. Lots of ultimates being used here by Melbourne. They still have the self-destruct in the pocket. Unfortunately for Ground Zero, Bust goes down at 97%.
I think that fight really encapsulates what I'm trying to talk about a lot here, Ben. When we saw Nami with the Graviton Surge in the previous fight for Melbourne Mavericks, instantly 3 players from Ground Zero go down. This fight, Locust hits a good grab, it hits a lot of people. There's not even a Transcendence that's used. Sure, Forbles did use it eventually, but it wasn't used immediately.
Yeah.
Ground Zero aren't even able to damage through the health pools. It's not even like they're getting healed up by sound barriers or Transcendence. Ground Zero is just not being able to follow up on these ultimates well enough.
Shatter going to come through. It's a bit messy up here, boys and girls. We can't really see what's going on, but there is a self-destruct in the middle of things also, and it will take out Jungle Jazz's mech. So Jungle Jazz into Baby Diva form for now. That's definitely not what Ground Zero wants here on attack. They're going to make their way at least up to the high ground, trying to quickly get onto the payload. Bust booped back and knocked down also. Mini charging through a very aggressive Melbourne Mavericks all over Ground Zero right now. Only 3 players remain. They're going to dance around the payload, but this dance is going to end. The Melbourne Mavericks will hold strong 3-1 here on Kings Road, now 2-0 up in his first match of the week.
Yeah, it's looking really, really easy for Melbourne Mavericks as well, for lack of a better word. I mean, I don't want to keep going in on Ground Zero, but
yeah,
for Melbourne Mavericks, that coordination is there. Their ultimate usage is perfect. Their positioning is perfect. They're innovating with their compositions as well and trying to keep Ground Zero guessing. So it just seems like everything right now is favoring Melbourne Mavericks, and Ground Zero just haven't got an answer for it. Down 2-0. And Ben, from what we've seen, I just don't think they're going to be able to make it back to a 2-2.
It doesn't look like it at this point. There hasn't necessarily, we haven't really seen anything that gives us hope, I suppose.
Yeah.
And maybe today, maybe this week is just a week where Ground Zero goes, look, there's not much we can do here. We'll just do our best.
You're playing with a sub, you're playing with a stand-in, and you've got 2 players not necessarily in their exact roles. So there's always that question for Ground Zero. So look, I don't want to necessarily draw too many conclusions from this one for Ground Zero, but it's obviously not what they want, but especially at the start of their season.
It was mainly traditional goats is what we saw here, apart from what the Melbourne Mavericks started off, which is what I like to call the modern family strat, Jordan. A bit of Ariel Winter. Ariel Winter, get it? Because Winter's on fire? No? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we'll leave that one for later. So, look, it was the team comps that we said we thought Ground Zero would be most comfortable with, and this time around, Melbourne just looked better. They just look better, and that's, look, I'm not going to break it down more than that.
I feel like I keep saying the same thing over and over again.
Well, that's what we're doing, yeah. It's okay. It's okay. Look, they've got a little bit of time now. Regroup.
Well, that's
maybe
what you
that's time to go, hang on.
What are we doing? What are we doing
Maybe
wrong?
what we're doing isn't working. Do we want to continue playing goats? Because even though this is our thing, maybe this isn't our thing with these players. Maybe we need to change up. Maybe we change the roles back. You know, maybe we get Dowsu playing where Dowsu wants to play, whatever that may look like.
I don't know what the solution is here. Like, you're right. Maybe you could swap Jungle Jazz and Choco back over. Jungle Jazz to go back onto the Lucio. Gotta be honest though, like watching Choco, I don't think he's necessarily like missed any beats or anything like that. I mean, you'd have to look at his POV to really get an idea of how he's playing on that Lucio. But I haven't really noticed any glaring issues that have really jumped out to me. The same can be said for Jungle Jazz. I think on the Diva hasn't necessarily been performing quote unquote poorly, but I think it's the little nuances and the little things that you would see maybe as a professional player, or maybe if you were watching them as a POV demo to really get an idea of how they're either struggling or performing well on their particular role. But as a whole thing, it doesn't seem like, you know, there's necessarily an individual that you can go hard in on for Ground Zero here, but it just seems like Ground Zero isn't meshing well as a unit. They're not being able to really coordinate themselves, and they're not being able to get enough done in those team fights.
Certainly doesn't feel like Ground Zero's day today. Melbourne up 2-0 in this first 3. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, more Overwatch action. See you soon.